Imagine laying in bed fast asleep, deep in dreamland, then being awoken by the songs of a hail of bullets. This is what the residents of Lusignan had to endure early morning on January the 26th, 2008. Now, the events of this morning would only last 15 to 20 minutes, but at the end of it, the entire village of Lusignan would be shaken to the core. At the end of the massacre, there would be 11 persons dead, and this included children. Now, honestly, I had a hard time deciding how to present this case because it's such a heavy one, and especially because it involves so many children, but I'm going to try my best. Now, I didn't include everything, but there are links below where you can get information and read up more if you want to read more information on this case. But just note that there are photos of the crime scene and they're very gruesome, and I came across them. I wasn't even looking for it when I came across it, so it's very shocking. I'm going to indicate which one of the links down below actually contains the pictures of the crime scene so that you can be warned. Now, between 1:30 and 2 a.m. early Saturday morning, a gang of approximately 20 men entered the village of Lusignan. They were armed with AK-47s and they stormed into the homes of 5 families. This story is so heartbreaking because some of the victims were asleep when they were attacked. So they went to sleep Friday evening and they just did not wake up ever again. So for all the families attacked, only 6 persons survived. And this was because 3 of them, they were actually injured, but they survived. And the other 3 hid, so they were not attacked. So before I go into how each victim met their demise, I'm going to list the names of the victims and their ages. So those who were killed were Clarence Thomas, 48, Vanessa Thomas, 12, Ron Thomas, 11, Mohammed Gordat, 32, Sigo Paul Harilao, 10, Sigo Bin Harilao, 4, Danraji Ramsingh, 52, Ruplal Sicharan, 56, Rewati Ramsingh, 11, Shazad Mohammed, 22, and Shalima Baksh, 52. And those persons who were shot but survived were Roberto Thomas, 11, his brother Howard Thomas, 19, and Nadir Mohammed, 48. So in cases like this where there were multiple gunmen, because I mentioned there were 20, it's very difficult to know who was attacked first, who met their demise first. But what we do know is that all the homes, their doors were kicked in, and that's how the gunmen gained entry. So from what is reported, the first home to be attacked was Gaumati Thomas. And in her home, the only person who was not injured was her. So at the time of the attack, those at home were Gaumati, her husband Clarence, her sons Ron, Roberto, and Howard, and her daughter Vanessa. So the reason why it's stated that this home was the first to be attacked was because one of the sons, we don't know which one, went outside to use the washroom. And while he was out there, that's when he saw this bus pull up with all these gunmen, and that's when he heard someone say, "Kill everybody." And when he ran inside to warn his family, the gunmen were already surrounding his home. So even though Gaumati heard everything that happened, she didn't see anything because she went and she hid behind a curtain. And the only reason she survived was because the gunmen did not find the light switch to see her. So from what she said, her husband tried to keep the gunmen out. He was trying to close the door, but of course they overpowered him and they gained entry to his home. And when they entered, they shot him dead. This story makes me so emotional because it could happen to anybody, anyone. So remember, this is 1:32 in the morning. So of course children are asleep. And that's exactly where Vanessa and Ron were. They were in one of the bedrooms sleeping. The gunmen entered the bedroom. They shot Ron right there on his bed. And I saw one of the photos, and I think this was the one with Ron where he's just laying on the bed and he has his finger in his mouth like he's, you know, comfort. And when I saw that, like, I just wanted to burst into tears because this child was just sleeping and his life was taken from him. Now, after killing Ron, they snatched Vanessa out of the bed and she was screaming screaming. She was screaming, begging them not to kill her. But of course, they didn't care. They shot her dead. So 19-year-old Howard, he was also shot. But when he was shot, he fell off his bed. And it's speculated that this is what actually saved his life, because when he fell, the gunman thought he was dead. So they moved on and they shot his younger brother, 6-year-old Roberto. But luckily, both of them survived. They have scars up to this day to show what happened to them, to show the terrors of that night. But we are so glad that they survived. They spent weeks in the hospital recovering, but the scars will always be a reminder of the night that they lost their brother, their sister, and their father. The next home we're going to go to is that of 14-year-old Shazida Bash, and she survived, thank the Lord, but she remembers everything that happened that night. She remembers being awoken by the gunshots, and so immediately she jumped out of her bed and she started calling for her mother and her father. Her parents came running upstairs to her. The gunmen were outside demanding for them to open their door, but they were so afraid, and so they did not open their door. They just stayed in that room scared. The next thing they heard were the windows being shut so that the gunmen could gain entry into the home. Now Shazida, her mother, and her father ran into the bedroom and they hid under the bed. But because the bed didn't have enough space under it, Shazida's father, Shalim Baksh, his legs were sticking out from under the bed. When the gunmen made their way up into the bedroom, they saw Shalim's legs sticking out from under the bed, and they demanded for him to come out. And to protect his wife and his daughter, he came out. They asked him where the rest of his family was, and he told them they were downstairs. So some of them went downstairs and shut the entire place up because they assumed that the family was downstairs. And when they returned upstairs, even though Shalim was begging for his life, they shot him. Now Shazida, she said that she knew the moment her father got out from under that bed that they would kill him. She had no hope that he would survive. But her mother and her, they're so grateful for her father, because they knew if Shalim did not come out from under that bed, that all of them would have been killed. So even though they mourn for him, they're so grateful that he gave his life for them. The next home we're gonna go to is that of Nadir Mohammed. And at the time of the attack, there were 5 persons at home. So the gunmen gained entry into their home the same way they have been entering all the homes, by shooting and kicking at the doorway. Nadir's wife, Bibi Khan, she was hiding with most of the family members. And she said what she heard next was the gunmen entering the home and shooting the entire place. Now after the gunshots ended, she waited a little, and then what she heard was her husband Nadir just groaning. So she came out from her hiding spot, and when she entered the rest of the house, she saw her son Shazam laying on the ground in a pool of his own blood. Bibi said that he asked her to bring some water for him to drink and to throw on his skin. I guess that's because, it was burning, so he wanted some kind of comfort. But sadly, he wouldn't survive. In the attack on his home, Nadir was injured also, but he survived, thankfully. And he said that even though he lost his son in that massacre, that it brought his community closer together, and that's the only thing that he can be thankful for. Vishnu Sicharan was not at home when his entire family was attacked. In the attack, he lost his father Ruplal, mother Danraji, and sister Rewati. It was some of his friends that actually made contact with him that told him that his family were killed. And he didn't expect what he went to his house and saw. When him and his sister arrived to that home, what they saw was total carnage. Something that would be engraved in their minds forever. Now, the last home that was attacked was that of Rajkumar Harilao. Just a few days before the attack, he actually left Guyana to go to Trinidad to get better life, to work and be able to provide for his family. He lost his wife Mohandai and his 2 sons, Sigopal and Sigubin. Rajkumar remembered that he was getting ready for work in Trinidad when he got a phone call that told him his family was wounded and so he needs to travel back to Guyana. Now, he didn't think it was anything serious, but he still got the next flight out so that he could return home to see if his family was okay. It was when he was at the airport that he saw the news of the massacre come over the television, and that's when he saw that his wife and his 2 sons were killed. And that took a toll on him, and he collapsed right there in the airport. He said at that moment he felt like his life just went from him and like he had nothing more to live for. It's so sad to think that he left just a week prior to go and provide for his family, and then in a blink of an eye they were all gone. Rajkumar sometimes blames himself for the death of his family because his wife thought that these men were only coming in to rob and not to kill, so she opened the door for them to enter. And then we know after they entered, they just killed everyone. So the reason we know what happened in that home was because his nephew, Arjun Bin, was actually in the home at the time of the attack. But when he heard the gunmen start shooting, he ran under a bed and he hid. And he remembered seeing the black boots of one of the gunmen walk into the room that he was in. They hit at the bed, raised up the mattress, but they did not see him. And so they turned around and they left. He said when he came out from under the bed, he heard his aunt's cell phone ringing. So he went out to see where she was. And that's when he saw in this room his aunt there on the floor dead and his two cousins in their beds dead. He said the phone was underneath her, so he didn't want to touch it because of course he's scared. He's a child. He's 11 at the time. So he just went outside and he saw this big crowd surrounding and persons were calling for his aunt Mohammed, but of course she's dead. This must have been a traumatic event for Arjun, like a traumatic event for all the children that were involved in this, even the adults. This was just trauma all around. So those were the 5 homes that were attacked. And after this night of terror, the entire country of Guyana poured out their sympathy to the village of Lusignan. And for a long time after, the country of Guyana would live in fear as the killer gang continued to rule. So what we know is that this gang has 20 persons, well, approximately 20 persons. And every gang has a leader. So who would be so heartless of a leader to instruct his gang members to go and kill not just adults, but children? Before we know who is this gang leader, we need to go back a few days. So on January 18, 2008, a 19-year-old by the name of Tanisha Morgan disappeared without a trace. Now at the time, she was heavily pregnant. It was almost time for her to deliver. So Tanisha, she was actually from Friendship, East Coast, and she traveled to town to stay in Kitty with some family because, you know, she was close to delivering her baby. So the closer she is to the public hospital, the better it is for her. Now, sometime between 8:30 and 9 p.m., same January 18th, a 63 bus came to the park and it was looking for a taxi for one of its passengers. That passenger would turn out to be Tanisha Morgan. So at the time, there was this Rastman that was moving carts from one place to the other. And so he came to the Barbies Park, and that's when he heard this driver looking for a taxi, and he decided to help. So he had a friend who worked a taxi. He called his friend and told him there's this girl on the park. She's looking for a taxi. It's to come and pick her up. The friend said, all right, no problem. So he just gone about his business. This Rastaman just decided he gonna go back about his business. So remember, the Rastaman was moving carts. So he left to go and get another cart to bring it. And about 15 minutes later, this taxi friend still didn't show up. So the bus driver was like, man, like, you see this girl heavily pregnant. She need this taxi. It's urgent. And the rest of me, I remember that at the time she had 3 bags, a big bag and then 2 other bags. So because he saw how pregnant she was and that she had this load, he decided, all right, he gonna go around to Quality Fast Food right around there where they have taxis, and he's gonna get a taxi for this girl to go in. By the time he go around and he come back, now let me just make you guys, let's just stick a pin here. It is less than a minute walk from the Barbies Park to Quality, okay? So by the time he go and come back with a taxi, the girl gone. She's gone. So he asked the bus driver that was looking for the taxi for the girl, where the girl gone. He said, man, she couldn't wait no more. He stopped a car, put her in, and she's gone. And that was the last time that anybody would see Tanisha Morgan. And I know the question you're asking yourself right now, okay, what does Tanisha Morgan have to do with the Lusignan massacre. Now, on January the 29th, the Tuesday after the massacre, a call came into Kaichor News, and it was for the publisher and for the editor-in-chief. Now, on the other side of that phone call, there was a man that was identifying himself as Rondell Fireman Rawlings. Yeah, so Fireman. This is a name that has brought shivers to the hearts of many Guyanese people. And what he had to say was that he was responsible for the Lusignan massacre. He threatened that if his wife was not returned, that he would make history and he would ensure another massacre that would be worse than the Lusignan massacre would occur. So wife is in uplifted commas because this is not somebody that he's married. It's his girlfriend. But in Guyana here, it's normal to call somebody that you're with in a relationship with your wife. So this was his wife. And who was this wife? Tanisha Morgan, the 19-year-old that disappeared without a trace. So, remember I said she was pregnant? Well, according to Rondell, you know what? I'm going to call him Fireman from now on. Well, according to Fireman, she was pregnant with his child. And he was saying he don't make joke with his seed. Okay? So, he wants his wife to be returned with his child, or else things are going to get worse. Now, there was actually no way to verify that this was Fireman, but all we can do is take his word for it. Now, Fireman was accusing some well-known individuals of kidnapping Tanisha and keeping her from him. And so he decided that he's going to kill a whole bunch of people to get their attention. Now, one thing to note is that today, the day that I'm filming this, February the 8th, 2022, Tanisha is still a missing person. Fireman was being accused of killing the late Minister of Agriculture, Sadio Shaw, and he claimed on the phone call that the kidnapping of Tanisha was to get back at him for murdering Sadio Shaw. But he said this is a false accusation and he had nothing to do with that. Fireman was adamant that Tanisha would never just pick up herself and leave him, because if she wanted to leave, she would have spoken to him about it. So he knew that she had to have been kidnapped because they've been together for 4 years. Now, obviously, the residents of Lusignan are going to be upset at the massacre. Who would not be? And so they protested. They protested, screaming, begging for justice. They were also protesting because they were upset at the police, who did not do anything the night of the massacre. Yeah, you heard me right. They didn't do anything. Now, the persons in the village, while they were hearing these gunshots going off, and I would assume even some of the victims, were calling at the police station for them to come because there's a shooting going on. But nobody answered the phone. None of the police answered the phone. So these persons were dying and no police was answering the phone. Can you imagine? You're hearing this horror, this pain, everything that's just happening, and the one set of people that you can call to come and help you, nobody answers the phone. This was the most upsetting thing that I found when I was doing this story. The most upsetting thing. Anyways, a little after this Lusignan massacre, Fireman decided he was going to do another massacre because remember, Tanisha has still not been returned to him. This massacre occurred in Bartica and 3 police officers lost their life along with 9 residents. So on February the 17th, 2008, the gang of gunmen entered the police station where Lance Corporal Zahir Zakir along with Constable Shane Frederick and Ross Osborne were working. So after killing these 3 police officers and wounding other officers, they stole some money, they stole ammunition, they stole weapons, and they also stole the keys to one of the vehicles. So while they were in this police vehicle, they were driving up the road and they were just killing people. They killed 2 security guards, Edwin Gilks and Irvin Ferreira, and a taxi driver by the name of Dexter Adrian who was on the way to get some gasoline. They proceeded to attack the crews of 2 vessels that were moored at the wharf of T&HD. Those killed were Ashraf Ali Khan, Errol Thomas, Dionarine Singh, Ronald Gomes, Baldio Singh, and Abdul Yassin. So at the time of the attack, all of these men were resting in their hammocks. When the gunmen came, told them to get up, go onto the wharf, lay on the ground, and they were all shot execution style, one bullet to the head. I cannot imagine the fear that these men were in, just laying, waiting to die, because you knew your time was coming. There was no way that they would have made it out of this. It's so sad to imagine. Like, sometimes I can't even think of another word other than sad, because that's what this is. It's all sad. It's so heart-wrenching to think of how frightened they must have been in their last moments. So with his own admission, we know that Fireman was responsible for the deaths of all these innocent people. He may not have killed each person personally, but it was by his order that children were killed. The government of Guyana decided to put a $50 million reward on the head of Rondell Fireman Rawlings. Any information that would lead to his arrest, you could get that reward. And at that time, even up to today, that has been the highest reward that has been put on the head of a wanted criminal. And luckily, Rondell Fireman Rawlings would not see the end of 2008, because it would be on Thursday, August 28, 2008, that Rondell Fireman Rawlings, along with his accomplice, German Skinny Charles, would be shot dead by joint services ranks. They were shot and killed in an unfinished building in Kurukuru. At the time of his death, Rondell was 35 years old, and his mother said that she hoped that his death would bring an end to the crime in Guyana. I remembered when the Lusignan massacre occurred. Like, I was 12, and it's like when it happened as a child, the thought that passed through your mind was, is my family going to be next? And that's not a nice thing for a child to have to think. And I know if I was thinking that, there were many children throughout Guyana, especially those that may have lived right in Lusignan, that were wondering if they were going to be next. So this story was honestly a hard one for me to get through. While researching, I cried. While doing it here, presenting it, I cried. I am trying to hold myself together, because every time I think about it, I'm just thinking about all the children that lost their lives, and all the families that were torn and will never be whole again. But when you think back on these massacres, there's questions that are still left unanswered. Where is Tanisha? Who is responsible for her disappearance? And if she hadn't disappeared, would these massacres have even occurred? So I think the police still need to work on Tanisha Morgan's case. I know her mother might still be wondering where her daughter is. So yeah, that's something that needs to be looked into. It has been 14 years since the Lusignan massacre, 14 years since the disappearance of Tanisha Morgan, and 14 years since the Bartica massacres. So many lost their lives and left permanent holes that can never be filled. Clarence Thomas, Vanessa Thomas, Ron Thomas, Mohammed Gurdat, Sigo Paul Harilao, Sigo Ben Harilao, Danraji Ram Singh, Ruplal Sicharan, Rewati Ram Singh, Shazad Mohammed, Shalima Baksh, Shane Fredericks, Edwin Gilks, Dexter Adrian, Errol Thomas, Ronald Gomes, Abdul Yassin, Zahir Zikri, Ron Osborne, Irvin Ferreira, Ashraf Ali Khan, Dionarayan Singh, Baldio Singh. They're all gone, but they will never be forgotten.